these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back to Hold These Truths, everyone. We're here with Rob Henderson. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Congressman. Great to be here.
Thanks for being on. So your life story is really pretty extraordinary. Rob grew up in chaos and instability, moved through foster homes across California, enlisted in the Air Force as a teenager, and through sheer determination earned his way to Yale and later a PhD at Cambridge. God, overachievers. Is a story of success. It's really just foundationally American. So glad to have you on. You've written a book that we're going to talk about, but I think that's what's interesting is what you've done with that experience. Become a really insightful voice in America on class, culture, the crisis of meaning facing young men. This is a really popular topic these days. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Your thoughts on manhood, responsibility, dangers of a society that no longer believes in truth, like some basic truth. So Troubled, it's, I'll say a little bit about it, then I'll leave it to you. It's a memoir. I think we probably got this from your publisher, but it's a raw, unfiltered memoir about growing up in the chaos of foster care and fighting his way toward stability. It's not a victim story. It's a story about duty, discipline, and the cost, psychological and personal, of climbing the American ladder. So we're going to cover it all today. Can't wait to hear about it. So where should we begin? I mean, where does your book begin? Does it begin in this foster care system? I mean, I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. So one thing, Congressman, that I wanted to do with this book, because the early portions of my life are often difficult to read, and I got this feedback from early readers of this book, is that I actually started a little bit at the end. I opened the book with my Yale graduation.
Okay.
This was essentially a way to communicate to the reader that this story has a happy ending, but we're got to get through a lot of tough stuff first before we get there. So I open with this scene at my Yale graduation, and I'm with my adoptive sister, my adoptive mother, and we're going through graduation. And then by the end of the book, I circle back around to this scene. And the point that I make here is, I just graduated from Yale, first person in my family to go to college, my adoptive family, and my biological family for that matter. And there was this moment where I was at dinner, and I get this phone call, and it was from the New York Times of all places, where they told me they were going to run this op-ed that I had written, which was titled "Why Being a Foster Child Made Me a Conservative." This was 2018, and so I'm getting this call. I'm talking to this editor. He's asking me questions about the op-ed, putting some finishing touches on it, and I'm standing outside of the restaurant having this conversation, and then I look through the window at my mom and my sister, and it kind of hits me that I'd accomplished these things that I never thought I would accomplish, going to college, graduating, going on to Cambridge, which I was about to begin at that point. But then it struck me that I would have exchanged all of these accomplishments to have just had a more stable childhood and not had to witness so much dysfunction and disrepair through the foster care system where I grew up in LA, all of the kind of chaos that I described with my adoptive family, and having to flee when I was 17 and enlisting in the military.
Wow.
And that was the moment where it kind of clicked for me that we spend so much time talking about these conventional badges of achievement of upward mobility, go to college, everyone should go to college, as long as everyone obtains a bachelor's degree, acquires a kind of middle class, white collar job, then society is a success. Whereas I thought to myself, well, I'm on my way to accomplishing those things, and yet I still feel that something was missing. And I think back to those earlier periods of my life and realizing we need to look more at what's happening with kids before the age of 18 as well as what's happening after.
So you think that sparked a policy path for you? Or a problem you wanted to fix.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
when it dawned on you. I guess prior to that, it had just been your life.
Yeah.
And you accepted it as such, but that was the moment you realized, wait, I could do something about this.
Yeah. That's right. And realizing, as I started to write more and speak out publicly more about some of my experiences, and I dug into a lot of the research and sociology and developmental psychology and so forth, and realizing I may have something useful to say about these matters. And so I opened the book after that brief kind of story about graduation.
Start with some optimism, because your publishers told you to. Makes sense. You could argue both ways, right? You got to hook a reader. But I like the way you did that.
So then I kind of open the early parts of the story by describing the origins of my full name. So my full name is Robert Kim Henderson, and my first name comes from my biological father, who I never met. The only information I had about him up until very recently was his name, which I found in some documents given to me by my adoptive mother, sort of passed to her from some social workers when I was an adult. My middle name, Kim, comes from my biological mother. So she came to the U.S. from Seoul, from South Korea, as a young woman. And her life very quickly unraveled. She moved to the U.S., to L.A., where I was born, and she suffered from drug addiction. And so there was a period when I was an infant, we were homeless, we lived in a car. Eventually we moved into this slum apartment in Westlake.
Who's we? Is your dad's? He's not even
just my mother and I. And this is the early 90s, and so my mother, in LA, especially the kind of East LA. Yeah. And so my mother would have visitors coming in and out of the apartment all hours of the day and night, kind of trading favors for drugs. Yeah. It was kind of like a crack den. Yeah. And some neighbors.
Do you remember this? Like how young?
I have some flashbulb memories of this, and I talk about some of the memories I have of my mother during this time. And eventually some neighbors called the police. They saw that there was a child in this apartment. The police show up, social workers show up. They ask my mother, where's this boy's father, because you're not in a position to care for him. And she said she didn't know who my father was. And so at that point, I'm 3 years old, and I'm placed into the Los Angeles County foster care system. And I spent just shy of 5 years living in 7 different homes all over LA. And eventually I was adopted by the Henderson family, which is my last name. And so this was the late 90s by this point. And
how old are you?
I was 8 years old. And so,
how old are you now?
Yeah, I'm 35.
Okay.
Yeah. And so by this point, 8 years old, I'm an unsophisticated kid. I wasn't aware that I was about to witness kind of the ongoing fragmentation of what's been happening in a lot of kind of rundown working class communities all across the country. So my adoptive family and I, there's my adoptive mother, my adoptive father, and my adoptive sister, who was their biological daughter. Okay. So we settle in this kind of dusty blue-collar town in Northern California called Red Bluff. And Red Bluff, it's located in one of the poorest counties in California. Most of the adults didn't have college degrees, very working class. My adoptive father was a truck driver. Adoptive mother was an assistant social worker. Neither of them went to college. And there was a moment during this period where my life was relatively stable. And my adoptive parents, they were nervous about adopting me because they'd had this record from the social workers, from the teachers, from my experience in foster care saying, Rob has trouble focusing in school.
Yeah, I want to go back to the foster system. I'm sure you will. But you're giving me the summary right now, right?
Yeah, okay. I mean, we're happy to pause anywhere, but I was doing extremely poorly in school because I was changing homes every few months, changing school districts all the time. And there was a period where I was doing so poorly in school that my foster mother and social worker and my teacher at the time administered, or they requested that the school psychologist administer an IQ test because they thought I had a learning disability. And I took the test and scored below average overall, but I scored significantly below average in the verbal section because I didn't know how to read. And I was in second grade by this point. I was 7. Barely knew the alphabet.
Now you're writing books.
Yeah. Although I don't know if that says more about me or about the state of the publishing industry, but
this is a lot about you. I mean, okay. So
so bad student in school. But then after the adoption, my grades improved. And one theme that I sort of knew intuitively, but then sort of sitting down and writing this all out, I realized like each time my life was unstable, the family situation was chaotic, my grades plummeted. And then anytime there was stability and oversight from the adults around me, my grades improved.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I try to tell people.
All the data tells us this, but you've got like the actual experience.
Right. And what I think a lot of people misunderstand about, having a smart kid, a kid can be smart, but that may be, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient to do well in school.
Yeah.
So even if you have the raw ingredients, a kid who's bright and curious and all those things that I had to some extent, I was so weighed down by everything around me in the foster system. So we can talk about
Yeah, I want to kind of back up a little bit. Well, first, you're obviously, maybe not obvious, but it seems to me, just from our brief conversation, you're close with your adopted family, right? I mean, they still are.
Yes, that's right.
But it sounds like there was still trouble. I mean, just maybe typical family middle class trouble. I don't know. Yeah. We'll get to that. But I want to know. I think a lot of people want to know about our foster system. Yeah. And just as a politician, this irks me because it's not really a federal issue, and it's not one I'm really well versed in. And we all know it's problematic. We all know I've looked at wanting to adopt, and it's hard to adopt. I mean, I'm curious how your family even did it from a middle class, because it costs a lot of money. It's hard. So it's God, there are so many questions there. Mm-hmm. But moving from home to home, I've heard horror stories of fostering. Maybe the foster parents are bad, and I've heard of a case. So my wife's friend, and they were foster parents, and they had this kid ripped away from them to go back to their mother, who is a terrible, terrible mother. Like this child is like crying and screaming, like, "Please don't take me back!" Like, they wanted to stay with their foster parents, and they got out of fostering because of it. Yeah. It was so just destructive to their psyche that because losing this child and knowing what was happening, and they were helpless. Mm-hmm. My neighbor is a foster parent back in Houston, and she's a wonderful lady, and but I don't know much more about it than that. Why do you even get transferred from family to family? How does that even work? And
well, on that point, one reason why this occurs is kind of related to what you just described. So often what happens is that someone from the family of origin emerges to take the kid back to the family. So you have a kid who, let's say he has a mother who's a drug addict, the kid's placed into care, maybe the mother sobers up, the father re-enters the picture, a grandmother shows up, an aunt, someone says, okay, I can take custody of the child. But in the meantime, if that child has been living with the same foster home for a year, 2 years, 3 years, they're often extremely reluctant to leave and go back to this new caregiver, or back to their mother, who may be abusive or neglectful, or many other things. Bad memories.
And this is kind of like the situation I just described.
Right, exactly. And so. And also from the perspective of the foster parents, they're often reluctant to give up custody, and they'll find sort of legal means.
They become attached.
Right.
Can they not adopt? I don't even.
Well, the law sort of favors the blood relatives.
Right. And that's what happened in this case. It's like the law, this is what's hard as policymakers, because it should.
There's no perfect answer.
But it really is case by case, and it relies on perfect judgment, which humans don't have. Mm-hmm. And, I want the law to favor. I think, what if I got really screwed up and lost my kid? Of course I want the law to be on my side to get my kid back And so I get that. It's just hard. I don't know if it varies state by state or.
Yeah, well, at least in the way that it worked in California was, the organic solution to this was to basically move the child frequently to different homes so that attachment never forms.
Ugh.
And so.
What do you think about that? So that's why you move so much.
Yes.
Just by law, that's how they do it.
Yeah, that's right. And so in this case, so maybe that strategy.
And I'm not sure if that's a bad idea or a good idea. What do you think? I mean, you're the one who lived it.
So I think it's, I mean, they're all bad ideas, right? But maybe it's the least bad.
Okay, they're all bad. Some are worse than others. Let's characterize it that way.
So it may be the least bad in certain situations, like you said, case by case. So if there is a father available or a grandmother, an aunt, or someone, then maybe it's not the worst thing for the child to not form strong attachments to any of the foster parents, because you want the kid to go back with their blood relatives. In my case, it was maybe one of the worst because
there was no chance you were going back.
And the foster system.
Trying? Was your mother?
No. So that was, believe it or not, that was not her first run-in with law enforcement, and so she was deported back to South Korea.
Oh.
And I
that was back when we deported people for crimes.
Yeah, that's right. And so, but at least at that point, the foster system in LA was overburdened. I'm sure it still is, and so I kind of got absorbed into this bureaucratic system where no one actually learned that this kid is never going to go back.
You're never going to have a blood relative,
right? So let's just put him for adoption right away. It wasn't until my 7th foster home where, at a certain point, every so often.
But you're not automatically put up for adoption.
No.
So that's on the caseworkers.
Yes, social workers.
And it's like I don't know. I hate this problem because I'm like, what law do you pass to fix that? Mm-hmm. Like the law's already there.
Yeah.
It's just bad management.
Yeah, bad management, and maybe not enough staffing or resources, and then too many kids in the system, where it becomes very difficult, I think, to tailor it case by case.
So you're just left in like this purgatory.
Exactly.
For how many years?
5 years.
And how many different
7
families?
homes. Seven families.
And a stage in life that's pretty important from a developmental perspective.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, for a developmental perspective.
Okay, so this is why you didn't want to start your story that way.
Right.
Because it is like, it's hard.
Yeah. And I tell those stories from the first 2 or 3 homes that I lived in where, of course, being torn from my mother was hard, and being taken into this home that I didn't know.
She's still your mom, even though you
Jeez. And then the next home and the next home, but then eventually, I sort of shut down emotionally. The body finds ways to cope with this intense stress, especially as a kid when you don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah. I kind of relate. My mom died when I was 10. And
it's hard on it.
It's very different. It's a little bit apples and oranges, but you shut off your emotions.
Yeah. You learn to deal with it.
Help me become a SEAL, I guess. It helps me with politics. But it's not healthy.
Yeah. I mean, there are healthy and less healthy ways to deal with it. I think some of the things that I described when I was a teenager are less healthy. And so, I'm moving to these different homes and, eventually adopted. And you asked me earlier, am I still close with my adoptive family? And the answer is yes for my mother.
You keep calling them adoptive. You just call them. Do you normally? Is that just for the sake of us speaking clearly? But you call them your family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My sister's my sister. My mom's my mom. Yeah. But to make clear in the book and in everyday conversation.
Just so people understand who you're talking about, because otherwise it'd be confusing. Okay. But you guys they're your family.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it. But not about my former adoptive father. So my adoptive parents.
Okay, so you had multiple adoptions.
Oh, no. So it was the same family.
Okay.
But about a year and a half into the adoption,
I'm still focused on the foster care system.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No, not at all. Was
there anything that stuck out? Did you have any really bad experiences, if you don't mind me asking, with any of those? Like, were there some who just shouldn't be foster parents at all? And like, how did they even get this job? Because it is a job. You do get paid. There's a stipend of some sorts, right? I'm not exactly sure, but
yes, there was never outright physical abuse, but there was a ton of neglect. So some of the homes I lived in had upwards of 8 or 10 kids living in them. Jeez. And these were kind of, I stayed in apartments or duplexes or very
these aren't
small
like
homes.
Rich people with 8 or 10 bedrooms. That's what's interesting, right? It's like
it's 2 bedrooms.
Because there is a financial benefit.
Yeah, you get a stipend for each child you take in. And so, if you can squeeze 8 kids into your 2-bedroom home, then, so much the better. So
because we don't have enough people fostering.
Yeah. So essentially,
it's not like we like that. It's not, I guess caseworkers, in their defense, I suppose, like you should look at that and say no, but if you don't have anywhere else to put them, what do you do?
Yeah, it's either in this overcrowded home or on the street.
Has that improved over time? You study this issue?
If anything, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
It's probably at least as bad as it was 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
At least in LA, there was a story out of NPR, this was a few years ago now, that the number of kids in foster homes as a result of parental drug addiction has doubled since the year 2000, and a lot of that is due to the opioid crisis.
The opioid crisis is obvious, but number of kids has doubled, but does that come with a requisite doubling of foster families?
No. I mean, maybe a few more, but I don't think.
What would from a policy perspective? Again, I think this is state-led. If I'm not,
I think it's state-led.
We don't do foster care legislation here. I haven't seen it in 7 years. It's a state issue. Yeah. But are there incentives that you look at in your studies that would increase and incentivize higher quality and just higher quantity of foster care parents?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know if there's necessarily a policy solution. Because you could think of something like economic incentives, but then the type of people who would be attracted to the economic incentive may not be the types of people that you want. If you want sort of people who have like empty nesters or something like that, and they have a home and space available. And I do know people like this, and there does. I mean, anecdotally, I've noticed increasing numbers of well-off older people, retirees, and so forth, who are taking in foster kids.
Yeah.
But it's hard to persuade people to do this because of the aforementioned issues with attachment, where you take
the only thing is increasing the money they get.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if there's any study on that shows.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with a study that sort of causally leads to more people being interested in this. I mean, ideally, we would want to work from the other end of this, which is reducing the number of kids in homes in the first place, and
of course.
Sides, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with that is, there's just a lot of messed up people.
Yeah.
And, one of my main focuses in Congress is the battling the drug cartels. And people are like, what about the demand side, Dan? And I'm like, one, I can't solve every problem. Yeah. So I focus just on the supply side, and because supply does create demand. That's my argument. But also, I'm not sure I'll ever solve the human need for self-destruction. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I will never solve that. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible, and I think it's something we just have to accept. Mm-hmm. There's mitigating factors, but it's like, the war on drugs is like, it was never going to win or lose. It was always mitigation. Mm-hmm. Defending, like stopping illegal immigration at the border. It's about mitigating.
Yeah.
And so every problem is often about mitigation. And I'm open to ideas on how we could, but and I think that's maybe what you get at in your book.
Well, there have been successful public awareness campaigns for tobacco use, for example.
Yeah.
So there were, up until the 1980s, something like 40% of American adults smoked cigarettes. And now it's something like 12%. It's a dramatic decline, and part of that was just this concerted effort at the sort of the political.
So what would that look like in the case of like
drug use?
God, we've had so many. I'm not sure I can find one drug addict who's like saying like, well, no, the drugs are good for me. They know it's bad for them. They do it because it feels good.
Yeah. Well, I think that one reason why tobacco use declined was kind of social stigma, but in many ways our society has gone the opposite, where we've attempted to destigmatize everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll make this joke that if only we had simply destigmatized tobacco use and been kinder to smokers, then we could have actually eliminated smoking altogether. But instead we decided to stigmatize it, and look what happened. Well, look what happened. Actually, fewer people smoke cigarettes as a result of this.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think some of those tools, if they can be used wisely to get people to stop smoking, or rather to stop using drugs. But for
using
marijuana,
drugs, stop being abusive, stop being a bad person, and that makes you lose your kids.
Yes.
That's really tough.
And this is something in the later chapters of the book, I talk about this idea that a lot of people have been interested in, luxury beliefs, which I define as ideas and opinions that confer status on credentialed elites while inflicting costs on the less fortunate members of society. And one of these would be the idea that we should decriminalize all drugs. And I cite
climate change is another big one.
Yeah. I mean, climate change and open borders, defund the police. But on the drug thing specifically, I share data indicating that most Americans are against decriminalization of all drugs anyway, but then when you break down the data by education level, more than 60% of college graduates are in favor of decriminalizing drugs, whereas less than half of people with a high school diploma are in favor of decriminalizing drugs. So it's actually the higher you go in education and socioeconomic status, the more people
because the
are in
feeling
favor of
is
this.
like I can deal with it because I've had a good upbringing, I know my left and right limits, so let me just relax on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
That's what I hear from people who want it, whatever it is, to be decriminalized. They're like,
Yeah.
I'm an adult, Dan, like why are you telling me what to do? And I'm like, I get that argument. It depends on what we're talking about when we talk about decriminalizing, but let's take marijuana for instance. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to die on this hill either way. But I do have parents in my district who are like, can you just not make it easier for my kids to get drugs? Like, it's already hard enough to be a parent in this day and age. Just not make it easier, please. And so there's that side of it. On the other hand, is those same parents might want to relax at the end of the day. Like, marijuana is its own category. But when you're talking about decriminalizing like the really serious drugs, I mean that's just crazy. I think we've already seen the results, and people are like, well, what about Portugal or something? But it's like a tiny country with very specific.
I mean, look at Oregon. They decriminalized drugs, and then they rapidly recriminalized because they saw the number of public overdoses and the rise in dysfunction and disorder.
If you basically decriminalize theft under $900. Going to be a lot of $899 thefts, and that's exactly what happened. Like it's amazing.
So to your earlier point, and it's a good point that there's not a drug addict who says, well, I didn't know this was bad for me, but there are a lot of people I think who are kind of on the margin, and if suddenly it becomes more accessible,
that's true.
You're going to increase the number.
Supply creates demand. I mean, I guess that's my point. Like that's why I kind of focus on supply creates demand and.
Supply creates, and then sort of the laws and the amount of friction to acquire it. So I'm sure you've seen some of the stats on the number of kids who are.
That's why I use mitigation. Like the war on drugs is a mitigation strategy. Like if I can just get one less drug dealer into that school, that's a dozen less kids that are going to be addicted for the rest of their lives and then overdose 20 years later, which is what we see that a lot in the Northeast. I've seen that in my wife's high school, and not so much in. Well, I actually grew up in Colombia, so that's a whole different drug capital of the world. But we don't not a lot of drugs done by students, honestly. But one drug dealer gets into this high school, and gets a bunch of kids addicted to whatever, Oxy or whatever it is. They don't die. But 15 years later, now they've got kids of their own. They're living normal lives. They're like, I can probably take 40 milligrams like I used to. No, you can't. Because you haven't, your tolerance isn't the same, and now you're dead. You just left two kids behind. Like, I've literally seen that, and it's just heartbreaking. The supply created that, though. And if you're addicted at a young age, there's a lot of science behind that. If you're addicted at a young age, it's a demon that just will not let you go. It's much different if you're addicted later. I think 26 is the generally understood cutoff.
And the family structure has something to do with that as well, where there was a study a few years ago which found they compared kids raised in stable, intact families with kids raised in unstable families. And what they found is that for poor children who were raised in stable, intact homes, they were less likely to become addicted to substances as teenagers compared with rich kids raised in unstable, unintact homes.
That seems intuitive.
But I think a lot of people think, the issue is, families, maybe they don't have enough in the way of resources, funding, cash transfers will help this.
It's about attention. It's about how engaged you are with your kids.
Because
rich kids, you don't need to tell me that study. I would assume that study is true just because, you can afford more drugs because you're rich, and your family's not intact, your parents aren't paying attention, versus a poor family that's but they're solid. And it obviously makes a difference. It's everything. But how do we create that? I mean, that's kind of that's your whole goal here, right? Is giving us solutions, and how do we create strong families? Because we know that's the genesis of most problems.
And a lot of it I think starts with family early in life, early family environment, and I share some statistics on the foster care system. So a lot of people they'll focus on something like college graduation rates. It's a number that people kind of intuitively understand, and it's a measure to some extent of success. And so the average graduation rate, or the overall graduation rate rather, in the U.S., something like 38% of adults over the age of 25 in the U.S. have a bachelor's degree, 38%. Now, if you look at kids in the bottom income quintile, so children in low income families, 11% of them get bachelor's degrees, much lower than the 38% overall. But then if you look at foster kids, the number is 3%. 3% of children in the foster system will go on to graduate from college. So in other words, a child in a poor family in the U.S. is 4 times more likely to graduate from college than a child in foster care. Wow. And the families in foster care, they're not poor, because you have to meet some minimal threshold in order to become a foster parent, and then you get a stipend and so forth. So this suggests, like you said, it's about attention, it's about oversight,
but
it's not
instability.
about,
I think that's because I'm trying to extrapolate what the meaning of that statistic is, and it seems to me that it's the notion of stability.
It's about stability, and this has been measured in research in developmental psychology. So when developmental psychologists look at childhood outcomes, things like graduation rates, likelihood of substance abuse, drinking and driving, incarceration, and so forth, and they want to look at what predicts those outcomes. One variable they look at is what they call childhood harshness, which is essentially low income growing up. So how poor your family was, and what they find is that the relationship between childhood income in the family and those outcomes later in life, incarceration rates, drinking and driving, substance abuse, and so forth, is a very small correlation, and some studies find no connection at all between family income and those outcomes.
Okay. So just measuring income.
Yeah, but then when researchers look at this other variable, they call it childhood instability or childhood unpredictability, and this is measured by things like how frequently did you relocate when you were growing up? How many different romantic partners did your primary caregiver have when you were a child? How much uncertainty there was in your day-to-day life? They find a strong and consistent effect, and these are very large effects in this kind of research. And even when researchers control for family income, they still find that early childhood instability significantly predicts those detrimental outcomes later in life. And so, there's not going to be like a magic bullet quick fix for something like this. It took decades to get to this point where you see the kind of family deterioration. One statistic that I point out in the book is that if you go back to 1960, 95% of American children were raised by both of their birth parents, regardless of social class.
Wildly high number.
And that was the case for most Western countries.
If you made me guess, I would have said, back then, maybe 70%. That's what I would have guessed.
No, I think I probably would have shared the same intuition. But it was 95%. And this was for rich kids and poor kids alike in 1960. That was the unspoken
it was a culture. It was a different culture. Now it's a culture of like, well, I can just let go of this job. I can just kind of
do my own thing.
I got to live my own life.
Liberated.
Whatever. I don't even know or just people are just assholes. I don't know. What about the fatherless? Because what we talk about a lot is the not having you talk about instability, which can mean a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. What I think is normally talked about, especially in conservative circles, should be talked about in all political circles. It shouldn't be political at all. But they focus on the fatherless home specifically. Yes. Did you find the same thing, or is that just getting mixed in with the general instability?
That's one of the measures of instability is did you have a father in the home? And just to finish up that earlier point, so 1960, 95% of kids across the board. If you fast forward to 2005 for kids in upper and upper middle class families, this is basically the top 20% of income. Mm-hmm. Those kids, it dropped from 95% in 1960 to 85% in 2005.
No, that's actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
So slight dip, but still the overwhelming majority of kids raised in that sort of upper income quintile. For working class and poor kids, so these are kids in the bottom 30% of income, it went from 95% in 1960 to 30% by 2005. So there's this sort of dramatic divergence along class lines where most kids from well-to-do families, intact families are the norm. And even if they themselves have divorced parents, which some do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I was like, that doesn't reconcile with what I believe the divorce rate is, which is higher than that. So
Yeah.
so we're defining it as a family where they're like, yeah, they're divorced, but mom lives down the street, and like there's some normalcy.
Yes,
Okay.
and that divorce rate, it's you have these aggregate snapshot statistics of the divorce rates, like 40%, something like that. But that's largely, not entirely, but largely concentrated in lower income environments now. You see it in sort of middle class, upper middle class families, but it's much more so.
Teams, and Congress is also pretty damn bad. So
I saw a lot of, I saw it in the Air Force as well. Just a lot of young people getting married a little too soon and then divorcing.
Yeah.
But how do we help to resolve this? I think part of it is speaking more openly about it. I think so much of our culture is attempting to do the opposite, like we were talking about before, of I need to get away, I need to do my own thing, I need to be liberated, and just to tell this story. So since this book has come out, so far 2 different guys have approached me, 2 different readers, both in their, I think, probably late 30s. They had young families, they had wives and kids, and they both told me essentially the same story, which was, hey, I was kind of getting bored in my marriage. I had these kids, and I'm thinking, is this really where I'm supposed to be in my life? One of them was telling me he started to get a wandering eye, maybe thinking about other women. And then both of them said, I read your book, and I realized, I think I was just being selfish. I kind of wanted to just check out and do my own thing. And then I read your book and realized that's not what I should be doing, not to my kids, not to my wife. And then they both recommitted to their marriages. One guy told me he was honest with his wife. They went into couples therapy. They're still married. And I'm just a guy who wrote a book, have a Substack, And I thought to myself, what if, sort of more public figures, more, widely read media and so forth, kind of had that same message of, obviously there are cases when divorce makes sense, when life can be messy, people are complicated. I understand that.
Sometimes it's better for the kid.
Yeah, totally. But then in those cases, like these guys are describing, where you just have a guy who's kind of bored and kind of wants to do something else, I think in those cases, what if instead of reading my book, or if you had read my book, the message was, be independent, do your own thing, and be true to yourself, or something like that.
They would have taken it.
That's the message. That
because they're right on the line.
Right, and there are probably a lot of people who are on that line. Who aren't in, what they call high conflict marriages, abusive. Yeah. They're just in kind of, it's a stagnation or something. But when you open the pages of, our most prestigious magazines and newspapers and so forth,
go on social media. Look at the fake lives I could potentially live.
Yeah, try to polycule, try an open marriage, try polyamory, try this. Maybe you can have an unconscious, a conscious uncoupling and have a good time. Have you heard this conscious uncoupling?
You'll have to explain that one to me.
It's something like. Essentially, we've both agreed on this decision, and so we're both going to live our lives apart, but get along amicably. It's not going to be
kind of like an open relationship. So we're going to raise the kids together.
It's like divorce it's like a high status divorce for rich people. There's also this idea of nesting.
So they don't technically get a divorce and.
I think they do get divorced, but it's more so it's going to be amicable, and we're not going to be in each other's faces or be getting into interpersonal conflict about it.
Divorce would be that way, I guess. Yeah. But, they're often not.
Yeah, but you hear that phrase tossed.
I've never heard it, honestly. But conscious uncoupling. That sounds very elitist.
It is.
It's like, do you mean divorce? Yeah, we mean divorce. Why don't you just say it?
Well, because divorce is de classe A, right? And so you have to say, conscious. But that is the kind of cultural messaging I think people get. I sometimes give people this thought experiment. Where imagine you have a kid in comfortable upper middle class family. Maybe there's a divorced family or 2 in the neighborhood, but generally their model of what a relationship looks like is a stable marriage. And 2 parents, college educated, they work hard and so forth. But then the kid opens social media or looks at Netflix or a glossy magazine and is seeing all this stuff about how much fun it would be to maybe experiment with drugs a little bit or try out novel relationship arrangements, sleep around a little bit, how fun and exciting that might be. But those messages are counterbalanced by what the kid is seeing in his or her everyday life. You're seeing responsible adults and so forth and stable marriages. But now you could imagine a kid who grew up the way that I did or like my friends did, where you don't really see stable families.
Yeah, because I cut you off when you started talking about your adopted father, right? Because I wanted to ask you more about your foster care system. So maybe let's go back to that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the way that I grew up, which was unstable. And, so my adoptive parents, about a year and a half into the adoption, they got a divorce, and my adoptive mother got custody of me. And as a result of this, my adoptive father was very mad at my mother for leaving him, decided to stop speaking with me as a way to retaliate against her. And as you can imagine,
How old are you?
I was a 9-year-old boy at this point.
Built some attachment to this
Oh,
guy.
yeah. No. Yeah, I called him dad. I thought of him as my dad. Yeah. And
why'd she leave him? Sorry, it's personal.
Well, no, not at all. No, well, it's all.
I assume you're right about it.
Yeah. So he stopped speaking with me, and after not knowing my biological father, all the homes, and then having a dad, and then not having a dad.
Did he speak with your sister?
Yeah, he did. Well, that was his daughter, his biological daughter. And so, just a couple of months after this.
So why did your mom leave him?
Oh, I'm getting to that right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a couple of months after this, my mother, I'm 9 years old at this point. She sits me down and she tells me that she is in love with a woman now.
Oh.
And so,
boy.
Yeah. And,
Plot thickens.
Yeah. So then they have a relationship, my mother and this woman named Shelley. And actually, once I got over the initial shock, because this was 1999, gay, LGBT stuff, it was not nearly as pervasive as it is now. Yeah. And so this blew my 9-year-old mind. I'm like, whoa, like two women together. But, I was 9, I got over it. And they raised me together into my adolescence. And it was, overall, like a pretty stable and bright point in my early childhood.
This is how did your mom end up with full custody? I mean, I'd be pissed if I was your dad too. I mean, and the law kind of favors that, and there's a lot of there's a lot of really depressed men out there who lost their kids, and maybe unfairly.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? What in your experience, was that justice? Or should it have been split custody? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had asked me at that point, I would have said, split custody. I would have loved to, at that point, continued to have the relationship with the guy I was calling my dad. By now, I mean, after learning that, he was that upset at my mother and kind of used me in that way, my
so he
my
knew
estimation
that
of him
he knew
lowered.
that the reason was she'd become a lesbian and was dating this other woman.
Not at the time, not when they divorced.
He just thought she was leaving him.
Yeah, she was unhappy or
he
whatever.
took it out on you. So, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
okay. So
Yeah.
let's try to. I mean, I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll try to get your opinion more generally.
Yeah,
In your experience, I can see why you're like, screw this guy because he used you as a.
Yeah.
I don't know how that gets back at your mom, but
Well, she was hurt by this. I mean, of course, because she knew that I was attached to him, and she saw my response when he wouldn't, take my calls or,
it's terrible.
let me stay over on the
So I mean,
weekends.
so they at least had some relationship where he could visit. I don't know. So it's different with every family. But,
Well, because he still had a relationship with my sister,
Yeah.
and so he still had, some contact with my mother because of that, and they're talking about my sister and so forth. But
messed up.
I think generally, the broader point about I think kids need their fathers, and as evident, I had that response, losing contact. It hurts kids, and they need a dad in their lives, and I know guys like this who, have been mistreated by the system and feel like they've just because they're the father and not the mother, they're not treated.
Yeah, it's just this kind of BS idea that like one is more important than the other. They're equally important.
Yeah,
and
especially once you, for boys, like once you get into sort of those adolescent and teenage years,
especially for girls too.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for just being a girl dad myself.
Yeah.
Like I just can't imagine either of us being totally out of her life. It would be bad. Like, can't let your hatred for each other overcome what's the well-being of the child, and that just happens too often.
Yeah, and there's also something interesting here. I mean, the numbers are too small, I think, to draw too much from this. But one interesting finding from the research is that kids from single dad homes do not fare as poorly as kids from single mother homes. Mm-hmm. But the number, again, like there's way more kids raised by single moms than single dads, and so it's hard to compare.
Yeah.
sometimes the reason why dads are single isn't because of divorce, but because the mother passed away. Because as you know, the court system favors the mother usually. So if there is no mother, the kids go to the dad by default. But there is something interesting there, and I'm not sure
How much
entirely
of a
what to
difference?
make of that, of why it is that single fathers seem to, for whatever reason, their kids don't.
I mean, there's enough of a data pool to make how much of a difference are we talking?
I mean, it's pretty substantial.
So it goes back to my initial question, because it goes fatherless homes. Where are we talking? Fatherless homes. I mean, for some reason, that masculine entity is important, right? That
presence and
Because there's a stability. I mean, you need the love and affection. Again, you need both, right? And
but you also need a bit of discipline as well.
Yeah.
And one reason why I brought up the boy thing is because once boys reach the point where physically they are larger than the mom, they're far less likely to listen and to obey. But if there's a male presence in the home, they have the dad around, then there's always that underlying, like I should do what my parents are telling me. So and that because boys can be so impulsive and behave so erratically, it can sometimes you need that. So think about my friends growing up. None of us were raised in those kinds of intact homes. I was the only one. So I had 5 close friends growing up, and none of us were raised by married parents. So I had friends raised by single moms. One friend was raised by a single dad, and actually so it was him and his brother. They actually turned out okay, interestingly, whereas my friends raised by single moms, their lives are more messy. And another friend raised by his grandmother because his dad was in prison and his mom was on drugs. And this is like a very common portrait of what a lot of families look like in working class communities all across the country. And so, and I write about this in order to basically communicate to people, like, if you want to have kids, you have a responsibility to them and so forth.
Yeah.
And by the time I reached high school, there was just so much chaos and drama and everything weighing me down that I graduated with a 2.2 GPA, barely graduated, C- kind of average. And
where did you end up in high school?
So this is in Red Bluff, California.
Where's Red Bluff?
It's about 4 hours, 3 hours north of Sacramento, something like that.
Okay, way north.
No, it's way.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very rural, very Republican. When I checked the statistics for 2024, it was something like 77% went for the Republicans. So, very blue collar town. And by the time I was 17, this was 2007. The war was, war in Iraq, Afghanistan. The military was more of an option, as you well know. And so, that seemed to be the pathway for me. It was the only ways that people got out of that town. You either go off to college or you join the military. And so I was 17 and kind of this unfocused, immature kid.
Well, you're going to write about that. I'm going to quote you here. The natural state of young males is apathy, self-indulgence, and laziness. Is that true? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I think we're seeing that now, Congressman. I mean, if you look at young guys, what are they doing? There's a lot of, hitting the dab pen and gambling, sports apps, and video games and
left
porn.
Alone to their own device, we'd have to have a control group to really know that for sure. But I mean, it feels. Yeah, I get it. It feels that way. It's hard to generalize. But
there's a very interesting book.
If left to your own devices, you'll be an apathetic, lazy loser. There might be right. I don't know. Like without any guidance, I don't know. Maybe that's true.
Well, I think this is one reason, among others. There's a very interesting book by this anthropologist, David Gilmour. He wrote a book called Manhood in the Making, and he basically surveyed cultures all over the world, especially like pre-industrial small-scale societies, what in a less politically correct time they called primitive societies. And in these societies, every single one of them had rituals in place to shepherd boys into men. And he quotes a lot of the people in these communities, a lot of the leaders and so forth, and they say, like, boys don't want to do anything. Like, they're naturally lazy.
You're right.
And you have to force
manhood
them.
Is a...
It's a culturally achieved title. And one of the points that he makes in the book is a lot of these societies, there's kind of a biological threshold for women, for when girls become women. It's very clear, like once you're able to produce children, that's kind of in these communities when you're considered a woman, it's just a biological process. You reach this age and now you're a woman. For boys, it's not the same. It's not as if you magically, you turn 15 and you're magically a man or something. It's you have to go through these stages of intense struggle, hardship, kind of hazing processes.
Yeah, like the walkabout or whatever. Yeah,
you have to kill a wild animal, or you have to endure.
That's what we got. You're right. We got to bring this stuff back.
Yeah, right.
That is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you join the military, unless you go to we kind of did that.
I think sports has something.
Sports is helpful, yeah.
Sports or Boy Scouts. I don't know what's going on with Boy Scouts now, but I think back in the day that was helpful.
I think it's fine. I deal with a lot of Boy Scouts. And
okay,
it's okay.
Right, good.
It's still okay. But it's I think so. I don't know. I'm gonna get canceled for saying that, but in my experience, at least where I live, Boy Scouts is the Scouts. That's the only thing that changed, from what I can tell. But no, I mean, I have a whole chapter in my book called "Do Something Hard."
Yeah.
Right. And it's so fundamentally true. And it's not and I don't mean go swim with sharks. That's just doing something dangerous. That's not what I mean. I mean, do something that is challenging to yourself. And and that is dependent on you. I could say, well, my challenge is going through buzz. Well, that ain't going to work for everybody. Okay. Yeah. Maybe your challenge, maybe something hard is it could be making up with an old friend.
Yeah. Oh,
that's
interesting.
You know what I mean? That's
sort of mentally,
just something challenging. Yeah. Maybe it's a cold shower every day.
Yeah.
Just something to remind yourself that you are strong.
Yeah.
That you can be if you choose to be.
Yeah. The cold showers and the cold plunge thing is so interesting because most of the people I know who are into that are people who in their daily lives are pretty comfortable, and now they're finding ways to force themselves to do something uncomfortable.
Yeah. I have a cold plunge, cold plunge, sauna. And the cold plunge therapies, I'm not sure how beneficial it is. I think there's definitely an anti-inflammatory response that is
I think
good.
Psychologically.
But it's really about can I sit in 30-degree water for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Turns out, I can.
Yeah.
I know I've already done that, proven that to myself. But sometimes you just gotta, even as a SEAL, just because I did it in Alaska in training, doesn't mean I shouldn't, keep up the mental strengthening occasionally.
Yeah.
And so I bought a freezer fridge and made it really nice, and now that's my cold plunge. And by the way, that's how you should do it. Don't go buying these $8,000 fucking, it's ridiculous. Okay. Just buy a freezer and just trust me on this one. Okay, so challenges. So you go through this. So let's go back to the anthropological studies that you were talking about. And that is something we sort of
we've lost that. I think.
Lack, right? I think that's why people start talking about what if there was some. It's so hard to put in a policy, but a national service requirement.
Yeah.
But it's not. If you take the military out, because you can't do that to the military. It's just we can't take that many people. It would mess it all up. We're not a tiny nation like Israel or Colombia is the same thing. Yeah. But there's a lot of other ways to serve, and whether it's. I mean, in my high school, we had to do so many hours of community service. I went to high school in Bogota, Colombia, so there's a lot of other weird things. Oil and gas business. My dad we would live down there all 4 years of high school. But our own set, that was hard in other ways, I guess. But it's still a comfortable elite, school. And they made them do community service. Technically, they're all supposed to join the military as well, if you're a Colombian. But we don't have anything like that, and this crisis of manhood is really. I mean, I see it all day because they're my trolls on Twitter. I mean, you laugh, but it really is.
I get a few too.
And there's people trying to speak to them, like you. Jordan Peterson really tries to speak to this. I think his books really help that group, and I don't know if I'm doing. I think my book would be helpful to it as well. It's a bit more broad than just manhood, but how do you fix it?
Yeah. And honestly, I don't really talk that much about sort of manhood specifically in the book. I talk a little bit about something called the young male syndrome.
Yeah.
And this phrase coined by a couple of psychologists back in the 80s, and basically they show consistently, regardless of whatever society you're looking at, everywhere from Finland to Malaysia to Zimbabwe to Japan, whenever you look at which group in the society is causing the most sort of mayhem mayhem, who's responsible for most of the arrests and misconduct, and it's young men, usually aged 18 to 22. And that age group, that's the group that requires some kind of discipline, some kind of guidance, some guardrails, mentorship, and so on. And I talk about this where I actually really disliked the first maybe 3 or 4 years that I was in the Air Force.
What did you do in the Air Force?
I was an electronic warfare technician,
Okay.
fixing missile warning systems and radars and so on. But this first few years, you're kind of living on base, a lot of oversight. It kind of sucks. And and when you're like 18, 19 years old, you want to meet girls, but there are very few at least on a base. Yeah. And so I just felt miserable.
If you're gonna meet any girls, at least join the Air Force.
Yeah. I mean, there are more there than
other
branches.
You want to meet no girls, join the SEAL teams.
Well, yeah.
But at least we live in San Diego, so
yeah.
I met my wife in San Diego, so
yeah. No, I had a friend who's a Marine who's in San Diego, and he had good things to say.
Yeah.
And so, but that was the environment that I needed to be in. Even though subjectively, I'm like, God, this sucks. Why did I do this? Like,
in
what was I
hindsight,
thinking?
though,
But it was exactly what I needed.
Appreciate the structure.
Yeah, that level of oversight and everything, how you wear your uniform and your
camaraderie,
all that stuff.
The military. I mean, it's
yeah.
I'm very passionate about protecting it as an institution.
Yeah.
I like to see us doing that now.
Yeah.
And I think
it saved me. I think it's. I
think people complain about Pete Hegseth, qualified or this or that. The whole point of Pete Hegseth, and he's a friend of mine, so I just I support him, and I think he's done a great. He was meant to go in as a culture warrior. That was the purpose, and I think it was needed.
Well, everyone else was a culture warrior too, but they were
wrong
never.
way.
Yeah, well, the media never framed it that way, right? Like they were never portrayed that way, but. When you're trying to do social experiments in the military, that's a culture war.
There's culture warrior the wrong way.
Yeah, well, there's this weird shell game that people play where if you do something that most people disagree with, that's fine, but then when you start to push back against it, they say, oh, you're doing a culture war.
Yeah, that's true. It's like such BS. But you know what? I think most Americans agree with our side of that argument. Honestly,
I think so too.
It's because it's intuitive.
Yes.
I mean, and like I said, I keep close touch with anyone in the military, all my friends, and everybody welcomes the new commercials. I would tell the I'm like, you want to increase recruiting? Just do more badass commercials. It's honestly that simple.
And we're seeing numbers increase, right? Recruitment numbers are better.
We hit our numbers. We're doing well.
Yeah.
And before this administration, there was this worry of like, well, if we go that route, then it's it might appease like a certain number of people, but then we're going to lose all these others who could be great technicians. And I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I want to lose the people who think they're joining some I don't know, just social experiment. Think they're joining some like safe space.
Yeah.
That's not what you think you should be joining. You should be joining for adventure, and you should be very much in mind that you have the potential to go to war. And if you don't join with that mentality, then I don't want you there.
Yeah.
And so our marketing should reflect that, and it does now. And look at that, recruitment numbers are way up.
Yeah, I wrote this piece for the Free Press a few years ago. There was this pattern of young new recruits who were leaking secrets, or they were publicly bad-mouthing the U.S. And I suggested that one reason is because the recruitment strategy has been so focused on the individual. It's very selfish. It's about well, it's going to pay for your college. It's going to give you this. It's all about what it can give you. And
also there's crazy kind of diversity quotas
and all that stuff too. Yeah, where it makes you think the military, is a social experiment, and it's not about serving something higher than yourself. And I think I did. I borrowed that famous JFK phrase: "What you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you." And and I think like that was one reason among others why got me to join in 2007 was it was just a few years after 9/11. There was this sense of duty, of a higher calling, that kind of thing. And as a 17-year-old kid who'd only ever thought about myself up until that point, there was something appealing about this seems like this is an important thing. It's an important historical moment, instead of it'll pay off your student debt or something like that. It's just you're going to attract a different type of person with one strategy versus the other.
Yeah. I mean, not saying to get rid of those benefits, of course.
Sure. Not at all.
But the marketing has to be. So how long did you spend?
8 years.
8 years. Okay. So I guess we actually started active duty almost around the same time. So I mean, I technically joined 2002 because I did ROTC, but I was commissioned in 2006. So
I was an enlisted, on the enlisted side.
And so then how did you get to Yale? Because you got a pretty bad GPA there. So.
It was.
How did this happen?
I had to explain this when I interviewed the admissions officer, because I had to send my high school transcripts, and she's like, "You got to explain this. This is not the typical transcript of a Yale applicant." But up until that, so I never took the SAT in high school. I'm a big defender. I talk about this in my books and my essays of standardized testing. I think it was a huge mistake what a lot of the elite colleges did, abandoning it, because all the data show that it actually increases the number of kids from marginalized, low income, whatever backgrounds. And they basically, when they abandoned the SAT requirement, they actually got fewer applications from low income and non-white applicants.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And there are a bunch of different reasons for this, but essentially standardized testing actually does what it's supposed to do, which is identify promising kids in bad
it's a merit-based
circumstances.
focus, and at least gives you a chance.
Yes. And so I took the SAT later in my life. So I took the ASVAB in high school, and I remember sitting with a recruiter in high school, and he's going over my ASVAB.
For people listening, the ASVAB is like the SAT for the military.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a standardized test, and he was showing me my test scores, and he showed me some formula to convert the results into SAT scores. So the ASVAB results into SAT scores, and I saw that my score was actually pretty good had I taken the SAT, which I didn't.
So you didn't take the SAT to get into Yale?
Later I did.
Okay, later.
So I'm talking about the ASVAB. So
okay,
then a few years later, fast forwarding, and I had about a year left on my enlistment. I had taken some night classes at a community college, finally signed up to take the SAT.
Gotcha.
And put together a pretty good package, recommendation letters for my commanding officer, that kind of thing, and managed to get this interview. And to their credit, they let me in. And so I had the GI Bill, started classes. This was the fall of 2015. I'll sometimes tell this joke where while I was writing this book, I took this genetic ancestry test just to see if I could learn anything about my father's side of the family, something worth noting, writing about for the sake of the book. And I discovered that I'm half Hispanic on my father's side. So my dad was Mexican, which I went my whole life not knowing about. But I think I put it in the book somewhere that I wish I had known that when I was applying for college.
Helpful,
every little bit helps. But I managed to get in, and this was 2015, which was, now, most of your listeners, I'm sure, are aware, that was kind of the beginning of a lot of the craziness that was happening in higher education.
Yeah, it was definitely the height of it.
A lot of student protests, I saw students marching around campus, calling for professors to be fired, for these people to be, deplatformed, canceled, and so forth. And I'm coming into this with no knowledge at all of what they're even talking about cisgender, heteronormative, all this jargon in this language of interlocking systems of oppression. And I'm I just got out of the Air Force 6 weeks ago. I set foot on campus, and I see these eruptions take place. And now that I'm kind of plugged into higher education, I'm hearing about the following year, so 2016. Worked with a friend of mine who was a former Marine, and he got into Brown, and he calls me up. This was Veterans Day on 2016, and he's like, "Look, they're burning flags on campus right now, and for Veterans Day, they're burning American flags." And he was like, why are they doing this? And I said, your guess is as good as mine. We could not, we were trying to put these pieces together.
We're all still trying to figure out the pathology of those years. Has it died down a little bit?
I think a little, although October 7th kind of reignited a lot of it. But and so I'm coming into this trying to figure out what's going on here, and I'm having these conversations with students, professors, graduates of these places, and at the same time I'm reading a lot about kind of the history of social class in America, and that's where I came up with that phrase luxury beliefs of these people who enact these self-congratulatory ideas, these policies, they promote these ideas, and they end up backfiring and hurting the very people they're meant to help. And it's all about sort of boosting your own reputation.
Oh yeah, so it's virtue signaling. With actual victims involved, unfortunately.
Yeah, a lot of grandstanding.
What was your PhD in?
It was in social psychology.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, and one reason why I decided to go off to England to do a PhD was because I was fed up with what was happening in the U.S. And I thought, okay, well, and I had this image in my mind of Cambridge as these dons in these robes, and they're just far
more
removed
objective.
Yeah, just
Well,
unconcerned with the sort of,
was that what you got?
campus politics. No, it was exactly the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
It's,
I think it started later,
yeah.
but I think the common, in hindsight,
Yeah.
those of us who look at this, you've looked at it more than I have, but it seems to me that we kind of created it, but then it
there was this weird
went
circular
over to
thing
Europe.
where
Well, now it's still there. I mean, now they're arresting people for Facebook posts. So it's
Actually,
like,
the UK there.
it's gotten worse.
Well, I think there was this weird, I don't want to get the whole intellectual genealogy, but I think so Marxism is a European ideology, and so is postmodernism, and it was birthed in Europe, but then they exported it, and then we took it, and then we added our own it's like postmodernism with American characteristics,
twinge to it, yeah,
and then we gave it back to them. So it's maybe it's revenge. But then in 2019, so this was my first year at Cambridge, Jordan Peterson was supposed to be a guest research fellow at the University of Cambridge. And I was really excited for this because I was a huge fan of his. I'd read his book and his podcast, everything. I was one of the Peterson fanboys. And then he gets disinvited. For whatever ism or whatever it was at the those student petitions and all this stuff, a lot of anger on campus. How could Jordan Peterson come here?
Yeah.
And
he says there's two genders.
Yeah, exactly.
They actually didn't even say. He's like, I refuse to have to say there's two genders. Like that was literally his point. I mean, that's what made him famous. That's how ridiculous
compelled
this point in time was.
Oh yeah. It was 2019 was and so I wrote an op-ed defending Jordan from all of the charges against him, which some people on campus liked it more than others, but that basically got me in touch with Jordan and got me thinking about, okay, well, this isn't just affecting American higher education. This is affecting British higher education. It's affecting a lot of different places, and so I started writing publicly about it and speaking more about this disconnect between the way that I grew up, in this place far removed from the concerns of the ivory tower, and then I get there and I'm seeing these people who are promoting all of these bizarre ideas that have no connection with reality of what people are actually concerned about in their everyday lives. And they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're helping people by, defunding the police or promoting decriminalization.
The common political phrase is, that's how Trump won.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. That's exactly.
Because it's like normal people don't believe this. We got to wrap up because I got to go. But what do we end with here? What's our conclusion?
What is the conclusion here? Well, I think for people who are fortunate enough to have gone to college and to live relatively comfortable lives, you forget college. Just if you've managed to be successful by whatever measure it happens to be. I think all of us have a duty to sort of interrogate our own beliefs and think about, what could be the second-order effects of whatever policy I support or belief that I hold. Is this actually helping the people that I want to help, or is it not? Because I find that a lot of people who hold the luxury beliefs, it's not that they're malicious, they're just naive.
Yeah.
They just want to be good people and they want to be looked upon favorably.
They want short-term satisfaction. At the expense of long-term pain. I mean, we have countless examples. You've already named a few. Defund the police. Minimum wage is another one. So you want to cut off. We have to sell. The conservatives have to sell the truth about the ladder, the ladder of upward mobility.
Yes. Yeah.
And liberals feel nice. It makes you feel nice to say, oh, of course you should get a minimum wage that's higher, right? We want to give money to people, want to give people free this and free that, and really they're just bribing them for their votes. But feels good, but that's short-term feel good for long-term pain and malfunction and kind of trapping people in these cycles of poverty.
Yeah, and I think that we could do more. The solution, especially on the left, is always more redistribution, more economic transfer, cash transfer. I'm not even necessarily opposed to financial assistance for struggling families, but I think that in addition to sharing material wealth, we could also share the kind of knowledge that you accrue if you become a relatively successful person. You've learned what habits and what actions.
That's what's so infuriating. It's like, hey, Mr. Liberal who's espousing this idea, did you do that?
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how you lived, and there's a reason you're rich.
Yes. Yeah, because they work hard. Often what you'll find with successful people is publicly they'll say, oh, I got lucky, and systemic forces and so forth, but then privately they tell their own kids, if you want to make it in this world, you got to work hard. So
one of the things I love doing is, we'll end with this, it's like, in politics or in policy, we should treat the American people like we would treat kids, like that we love.
Yeah.
You should treat them like we love them. And you're not the aunt trying to spoil them and make them like you. You're trying to help them succeed, which means you have to treat them like you love them.
Right.
And that means guardrails. That means
Discipline.
consequences. That means merit-based upward mobility. It means a lot of things that every parent inherently knows. And that's you can take it at the micro level, at the family level, but you can also extrapolate that to the broader policy level, I think.
Yeah.
Treat people like you actually love them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, treat them like if they were one of your loved ones. You would never tell your just take it easy, don't do anything.
Yeah. It's not your fault you got bad grades. It's the teacher's fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that do?
Yeah.
Not good.
It's undermining. Yeah.
Thank you, Rob, for being on. Sorry
you,
we could talk forever. It was really interesting. I think people got a lot out of that. So the book is Troubled. It's been out for a while. It's a national bestseller. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Congressman.
All right.